What's up, guys? So today I want to make a quick little video on how to fix your front passenger drive shaft from popping out of its drive cup on the Kraton6s V5 or EXB. And I had this problem once and it keeps on happening. I thought I fixed it, but I guess I didn't. And I also broke my A-arm, which made it pop out even more. So we're going to fix the A-arm and fix the problem at the same time. But let's get started. I'm going to take off the shock first. Or not completely take off the shock. First, we're gonna move the shock out of the way, get that out of the way. Then we're going to take the top arm off. I think we'll do that next. And I guess you don't have to fully remove the screw. I usually just pop the shock out of the way and push the pin right back in where it came from. That way you can't lose your hardware. Okay, now it's time to take out the top arm. On the V5, it's just that single pin screw up at the top. It's not like the EXB where you have a pin and a screw holding the pin in. I am considering switching to that design very soon, but right now, if it ain't broke, I'm not going to fix it. And then be careful, don't lose those little washers on the backside or where you ever have them placed. Should be 3 of them depending on the setup you have. Usually there's only 3, 2 thin ones and a thick one. Save those suckers and put them off to the side so you don't lose them. I think then we'll go ahead and take the tie rod off. Well, I guess, guys, you don't have to take the tie rod off. I'm going to go ahead and take it off because it will just annoy me if it's in the way. You don't have to do that. It's just something I do. Okay, next up, you're going to need a big Allen key for your ball joint caps or whatever you want to call it. Okay, so I have this it's a pretty big Allen key. And I'm running the Hot Racing hubs, but I believe the stock hubs use the same. It appears to be a 5mm is what my tape measure is showing. So that's a 5mm. Only take out the bottom one. And I guess technically you don't have to take this off. You could just go through the big hex and undo your ball joint from there, but to be honest, if you just take this out of the way, it'll probably save you time in the long run of trying to fiddle with reaching through the small gap. Okay, now that you have the cap off, go ahead and use your 2.5mm hex drive and start backing this dang thing off. And yes, I do have a drill. I could be doing this faster, but nothing wrong with doing it by hand. Okay, now I got that away from the whole thing. Time to take off the sway bar. And I am realizing now, guys, that was a silly mistake. I'm used to just doing maintenance, but you will need to take the shock stuff completely off. Now I'm going to take the sway bar off. That'll make things, get that out of the way. It's kind of a pain. Your arm has to be fully drooped to get it to start backing out. Okay, now that that's removed, go ahead and kind of get the sway bar off. And now you have to, in this case, I have the RPM front bumper on, so I'm going to have to take that RPM bumper off or take it off so I can access the front screws that hold this front thing on. So go ahead and flip your car upside down. And it's just those 4 right there. And if the screw holes have dirt in them, don't try and undo the screws without taking the dirt off or getting the dirt out first, because you'll probably end up stripping the screw out, because you won't get full engagement with your hex key with the dirt in the way. Easiest way I found is take like a X-Acto knife or a scalpel and just go around the edges. It does a pretty good job of that. I'm going to go ahead and run one of these screws back in just to hold the bulkhead in place, or the diff carrier, whatever you want to call it. Just keeps that from flopping around. Okay, now that one of those is in place, luckily I redid my front end not too long ago, so I don't have too much dirt trapped in between there. If you have dirt in there, take the time to clean it up and get that stuff out of the way. Now I'm going to go ahead and remove the front pen holder. I'll adjust the camera a little better for you guys. Okay, so for me, it's just 2 screws. This is not an M2C racing part. I just found this stuff off of Amazon. It was a set for the front and rear. One thing that is helpful, I just want to mention, guys, is in the front here, I have socket head screws that run a 2.5 millimeter head, and stock, I believe the truck has just button heads that take a 2 millimeter hex, and I had those strip out on me, and it seems like button heads strip out all the time, especially with them being not as big as a head. So that always seems like a problem. So I started switching over the majority of my things to socket cap screws instead of button head. But there are cases for button heads that socket cap screws cannot do. So I got this piece off. Now at this point, you should just be able to pull your arm off. As you can see, mine broke right there. Didn't fully split off, but almost did. And one of these things, so I had the Driveshaft always popped out, but I think another thing that happened is my arm was stretched, like the hole itself. You may be able to tell that that's more, it's hard to pick up, but it's more of an oval than a circle. And if you like push this back together, you can see it's more of an oval. And I think the arm was stretched already, or maybe had a slight crack in it, and that was causing it to allow more room for flex, even though I've done modifications, like taking the red end cap that goes on this. Always take that off if you can. It'll bring your front end closer together and pull that drive shaft closer into the cup. But I'm also thinking about shaving that down, and that will also allow me to pull it in closer. One thing to do is do not forget to take out your droop screw, and this is pretty nasty, has a ton of dirt in it. So I'm going to get my car out of the way and just kind of start scraping away at the dirt in there. So I'm just going around inside of there. Doesn't have to be too perfect after it. Then this is not a high torque screw. So there's all the dirt. I'll go ahead and vacuum that up. Okay, now use, yep, it's a 2.5 millimeter hex. Start unscrewing that. I'll show you guys what I'm doing. Okay, so it's a fairly decent sized screw. And as you can see right here, that has been absolutely tore up by that drive shaft popping out. Now I gotta open up my expensive armor parts and replace it. Okay, so I believe these are not mirrorable. Nope, they are not. So one goes on one side and the other one goes on the other. Kind of sucks because they're really close to being able to be mirrored. There's not too much of a difference. The main differences I'm noticing is, well, obviously you have your difference on what side the screw goes in on that, but also you have this indentation for the drive shaft. But in my case, it would be the passenger side one that I'm replacing. So I'm gonna go ahead. To save you guys some time real quick, I ended up reinstalling the arm just to find out that I didn't like how long it was still. So I'll skip that part of the video and go to where I decided to shorten it. Okay, so after doing a little more looking, I'm actually deciding that we're going to back this out and we're going to shave down this lip, and that will bring it closer in, and that way it won't happen. And like I say, guys, it seems like once it happens once, it happens from then on. So I think it's just best to go ahead and play it safe and bring that arm a little, shave that down and bring it in a little bit more, and hopefully that will solve our problem. Okay, one last thing before I start modifying this is I just want to mention, check the depth of how far this hole is drilled. It's not like too late before you shave that off, but mark it there and then compare it. And as you can see, I got about 2 millimeters before this will bottom out, and that'll prevent it from stripping out. So let's just say I can shave about 2 millimeters, which is about all you'll need to do to keep this from drive shaft from popping out. Okay, so I modified the A-arm. I shortened it. Here, I might have another stock one. So, let me see if I can get the focus for you guys. Okay, right there. You can kind of see. So, there's how much. This is the one that I shaved down. This is the one that I didn't. As you can see, I shaved it down by quite a bit. And what I ended up doing is I took a metal cutting handsaw or whatever, hacksaw, and cut a thin sliver off, and then used a sander for the rest. And it's not perfect by any means. If you can look around the edges, you can see that it's not an even surface because I just used a sander to rough it up, but it's pretty dang close to level, and that'll be good enough. So I'm going to go ahead and reinstall this arm, and then hopefully reinstall it, and it should be good. But you will have to adjust all your toe in, toe out, and all that camber and all that good stuff. So that'll be fun. After doing modification, guys, I'm going to start this by hand before I use my power drill to slowly get it going, just because since I may have messed up the threads, and I want to make sure that it gets started good. This is definitely going in easier than the first time I did this. Still kind of difficult though. Okay, now that I make sure it's going in nice and square, I'll go ahead and get my drill. Okay, so now that it's close, I'm going to go ahead and finish it up by hand, because this could be getting close to the threads bottoming out that is pre-drilled in here. So that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, guys. And yeah, this is extremely difficult to turn. Okay, tell you what, guys, I think that's as far as I'm going to get in. There is a small gap in there, just big enough for your fingernail to get in, but I think the threads have bottomed out, because that is extremely tight, and it won't go anymore. So yeah, I'm going to say the threads have bottomed out, which that is no problem with that gap there. This car, again, is designed to run with that screwed in or out. But again, the main thing is you're just going to have to adjust your settings. And hopefully, I have a spacer in here. Hopefully, if I take the spacer out, I still have enough room that I can screw this in and get my toe set all right and my camber. But I'm going to go ahead. I think we'll go ahead and pop the drive shaft in first. And pop this top arm in. And since I'm not going to be doing any more modification, it is what it is. I'm going to go ahead and do this as a final assembly. What I do for these spacers is I run the, and it's hard to show here, but I run the fat one in the middle with two skinny ones beside on either side of it. I don't know if that makes a difference on anything. Probably doesn't. That's just the order I like to run them in. And my other side had backed out a little bit during the bash, so I'm going to go ahead and screw that back in. Okay. Now we can go ahead and look at our suspension. And it looks really good, guys. I like how far it is in. Let me see if I can show you guys on camera. Okay, I don't know how easily you guys can see this. I'll use my pointer. I'll use a pointer so you guys can see. But there's the dog bone. That's the corner of a dog bone right in there that you're seeing. I can maybe, there the sway bar's out of the way. So you can see that dog bone. And you can also see the one on that side. And again, with this lighting, it's hard to tell. But it appears as if this passenger side is maybe even a little bit further in than the driver's side. And that is not bad. That is not going to be a problem. And if anything, that'll mean that the driver's side will pop out before the passenger side. And I've never had the driver's side pop out. So this is looking like it's going to be a good fix. The moment of truth will be when I start adjusting my camber and all that stuff and seeing how that works out. But I'll go ahead and finish assembling this for you guys. Okay, now that that stuff is done, I think I'm going to start with the sway bar first. Probably should have maybe done that before I even put in the top arm, because it's kind of going to be a pain. So take note of that when you guys go to do this. If I move my tire, that would help. And then you got to kind of try and find the hole. Got it all lined up. Now these sway bar screws, they seem like not the actual screw itself, but the plastic that they go into, strips out relatively easily. So I'm always, it's not like you have to tighten them up that tight anyhow, but I'm always cautious when it comes to that. Now I'm just going to verify my sway bar's working. As you can see, it is. Now it is time for my tie rod, and I would put more Loctite on this, but it has plenty left on it right now, and it was hard to get off in the first place, and it's going on a little tight anyhow. Okay. In fact, there was so much Loctite, the bottom screw that actually goes into this tie rod has actually gotten stuck in the carbon fiber of this like knuckle here, right here. It's not stuck to the point where I'm worried about it. It does slightly spin, just not a whole lot. I'm gonna go ahead and put the cap back on this. I'll tilt this a little bit better so you guys can see this. And again, it's just that giant Allen key. This is the boring part of the video because all I'm doing is assembling it. But I do have a little tips and tricks that I like to imply. One thing that would have been smart to do now looking back at it is tightening, putting this cap back on, like before I even put the top armor on, because then I could kind of tell how tight or loose this needs to be. So right now I'm not going to have the best judgment. Okay, I'm going to stick with that, guys. It's got a little bit of play. Might tighten it up just a little bit. But again, kind of a mistake on my part was not tightening this first. So but this seems to move nice and freely. Okay, guys, now I'm going to put the shock on, and we'll be on the home stretch of getting this done. It seems that my droop screw could be backed out a little bit, and I'm actually going to set this before I put the shock in. Although it isn't too bad, I might screw it in just a hair. I usually set my droop screw to where the shock, when you put it back in, is perfect, almost perfectly lined up with the screw hole, or maybe it just has to go, maybe you just have to compress the shock just a little bit for it to work. But that's kind of how I set my droop screws, is I make sure that the shock, when you go to reinstall it, is almost perfectly in line with this hole, or you have to compress the shock just a little bit. To me, that's the perfect setting, and it works every time. So I don't know if you guys saw that, but I had to slightly compress my shock to get it to pop in, and that pin almost pops right in. Then go ahead and install the screw back that holds the pin in place. And there you go, guys. That's an arm swap and problem fixed with the drive shaft popping out. Everything looks good. Now we just have to screw in this top thing and do all the boring camber adjustment and toe and all that stuff. So anyhow, that's all for today, guys. I really appreciate if you guys followed along, but if anything, this will kind of help you guys figure out this problem, because if you guys have ever had this problem with the drive shaft popping out, it is extremely annoying, and I wish there was a little bit of an easier solution, or that the car didn't do this straight out of the box. But I guess you just get what you get. One last thing I just want to mention before you guys go, and this is pretty important, is I've finally got the camber on this wheel adjusted to match the other side, and everything's looking good. But adjusting the camber, I ran into a problem, and that was I had screwed in my ball joints too far, and it was actually pushing the drive shaft too far into the drive cup and making it bind. So when you went to turn, it was really difficult to turn. And so I solved that by just backing out the ball joints a little bit. I think. Okay, so right there you guys can see what exactly is going on. And down here I have, it's a thin spacer and a medium thickness spacer that is down there, and up top I believe I have a thin spacer, I believe, and that's kind of the setting I'm running. So I did kind of shave it down a little bit too far, and I know that what I just told you probably won't apply to you, because the chance of you shaving down your arm to the exact thickness that I did is rare. But that's just kind of a heads up, is make sure that when this is all said and done, it's not bound up in there, and everything turns fine and works fine. But I'll definitely say this does not make it a failure. This is still a big win, and I am looking forward to be able to run my car without the annoying problem of the drive shaft popping out. Sorry, I'm just in a camera, but I just want to get one final shot comparing either side of the drive cups. Okay, so I don't know if you guys can see that, but if you look at the left side of the screen, or the passenger side of the car, you can see how far it is, and if you compare it to the driver's side, the passenger side may be a little further in. It's kind of difficult to tell because that pin's a little more wore. Right there, that pin down there is a little more wore from popping out. But either way, it's still in quite a bit, and I don't think I'm going to have to worry about popping out anymore. But that's all for today, guys. Again, appreciate you guys watching, and consider subscribing if this helped you out or something. But that's all. Appreciate it, guys.